Good afternoon. Welcome to today's work session.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This was a private session. All right, we're going to have a public comment period. I asked Mr. Fields if anyone had turned in a form asking to address any of the, or really the one issue we're going to be discussing today in our session. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address this before we dive in? All right, we'll close the public comment period. And the purpose of today's meeting was to have a discussion. We're not going to be making any decisions today or moving, making any motions, but we did want to have a session to discuss a process for determining which, if any, entertainment or ET permits would be renewed or not renewed at the next annual meeting in April 2024, given the amendments made to Chapter 6.77 by BL 2023-1869, and also in light of the updated data and information from the Connect Downtown study. Mr. Fields, Mr. Rooker.
We had, in getting ready, we knew that it would be, as we start going toward April, we knew that there would be a need for the commission to discuss processes by which you would be making your decisions. One of the things that, so we wanted to make sure you had an opportunity. Since it has to be done, we want you to be able to discuss freely. That's what the work session allows you to do. It's not a public hearing where the public can speak.
Oh, no, it's not a public hearing.
Yeah, it's not a public hearing, but it is a public meeting. That it is a public meeting to allow the opportunity for folks to hear your thinking and your ideas, even though you wouldn't be making any decisions today. So we do have an idea to present to you from a staff standpoint that would give you an opportunity to react to that. Clearly, the decisions that you'll make will be, in the process you go through, will be your decisions to make.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to add, last week we actually had a meeting with the sightseeing vehicles. We met with them mainly to talk about if they would consider working on a route that would take them outside the inner core where we're seeing the impact of the number of vehicles that are operating in the core. We've set up another meeting for in January. They were going to go back and look at their routes and see if they could adjust their routes to get outside the core for consideration. We also discussed in that meeting the potential of allowing more permits for a route that would be completely out of the downtown area. So, for example, if they were going to do sightseeing out on the west end, what that would look like. So there were multiple conversations that were had. We're going to have another meeting with them in January, so we'll have some more information to share. But I did want to let you know they were all open. They were going to go back. They were going to actually look at the routes and how they could adjust it to get them out of the core. I've actually received 2 new routes back from 2 operators of sightseeing, and I'm looking forward to seeing more. And I think we are scheduling that meeting the second week in January. So I just want to let the commission aware of that. Thank you.
If one of us or any of us wanted to attend that meeting, that's open to us as well.
Yes, sir. At the time when we called them in, it was a very informal meeting. It was just to kind of talk through, this idea of, sightseeing does bring some opportunities for people to learn the history of our community, of our city, and of our region. And so it was the conversation of, some folks are like, well, we don't really go to the downtown core except for here, but we would be glad to move here. So could we look at a permit that doesn't even touch the core? So that became part of the conversation about maybe creating different types of sightseeing permits that in the core they would have this type of permit, outside the core they would have this type of permit, in this area they'd have this type of permit. So we're playing with all of those ideas right now as well.
Ms. Costonis, is that even a legal option to open permits up to just a very specific area for sightseeing?
So section 677-320 of the code discusses operating area, and it says entertainment transportation vehicles, and keep in mind that the larger generic term entertainment transportation vehicles includes seated sightseeing vehicles, shall operate upon the streets within the metropolitan area on routes or zones and within hours of operation established by the MTLC or its staff. So you can establish routes and zones. You can also, with the new amendment, BL 2023-1869 to the code, your fact-finding duties are a little bit different than they were previously. So it says the MTLC must make a prerequisite finding as to what number of entertainment transportation vehicle service providers and vehicles are required by the public convenience and necessity in the metropolitan government area before it may issue any new certificates of public convenience and necessity, renew any previously issued expiring certificates, or add any additional permitted vehicles to the existing certificate holder's permitted fleet. Further, the MTLC must find, and then it's the regular language about being fit, willing, and able. And then going on to subsection B, it says, in making the above findings, the MTLC shall, at a minimum, take into consideration the number of entertainment vehicles already in operation, whether existing service is adequate to meet public need or so great as to be exceeding the public need and unnecessarily adding to traffic congestion, and the character and fitness, blah, blah, blah. And then same thing in section 677-06, though. That was also changed by BL 2023-1869, so that it now says, all certificates issued under the provisions of this chapter shall expire on April 30 of the year following the date on which the certificate was issued. All certificates may be renewed by the MTLC director for each successive year between April 1 and April 30 of each year. If the applicant meets all applicable standards for renewal as established by the MTLC, and if it has not been determined pursuant to 677-030 above, that the number of entertainment transportation vehicles already in operation is so great as to be exceeding the public need and adding to traffic congestion, a renewal fee for each approved certificate and other licensing fee shall be charged at the annual renewal of the certificate. So basically that's incorporating back the kind of additional language in section 677-030 that says one of the findings that you can make is whether the existing number of vehicles is so great that it is exceeding the public need and unnecessarily adding to traffic congestion. So that then becomes a consideration that you can take into account at the annual renewal stage. And then subsection C of that is if the MTLC has made a finding that the number of entertainment transportation vehicles already in operation immediately prior to the annual meeting is so great as to be exceeding the public need and adding to traffic congestion, the MTLC shall determine what lower number would meet the public need. All renewing and new applicants shall be placed on notice that at the annual meeting, they must show cause why their application for a new certificate of renewal or for the addition of vehicles to their fleet should be among the new number determined to be adequate to meet and not exceed the public need. If accordingly, it accordingly may not be possible to renew every certificate or vehicle that was permitted in the preceding year. In the event the number of permits is reduced and any existing permits are not renewed at the annual meeting, such non-renewed permitted vehicles may continue operating for 100 days from the date of the non-renewal. In determining which applications will be granted, the MTLC may take into consideration the following non-exclusive factors among any other criteria they see fit to adopt in their regulations. So that might be the outcome of these working groups, is that you might end up adopting some criteria to your regulations, but that would be for a future public hearing. And then the things that you take into account are whether an applicant for a new or renewed certificate has violated any of the provisions of this chapter or failed to comply with any rule or regulation established by the MTLC, violated any provision of this code or other ordinances of the metropolitan government or laws of the United States or the state of Tennessee, the violation of which reflects unfavorably on the fitness of the holder to offer transportation services, including but not limited to violations for excessive noise or alcoholic beverage open containers. 3, failed to pay assessments or taxes due to the metropolitan government. Or 4, made a misrepresentation or false statement when obtaining or renewing a certificate or additional permits or transferring a certificate. D says, if a licensed entertainment transportation vehicle company or individual fails to submit an application to renew by the deadline set by the MTLC for same, the license shall expire. So that's kind of that's what we need to fill in the gaps of, basically, are those new provisions. If you guys are anticipating that you may make a determination that, in fact, the number of vehicles is currently so great as to actually exceed what is justified by the public convenience and necessity, and in fact, non-beneficially add to traffic congestion, then, you know, that is the trigger that causes you all to determine how you're going to get down to the number that you do come up with, that you do think is the appropriate number. And as the director was saying, because under Section 320, you have the ability to create zones, you could create multiple zones. Like, the study is focused on the immediate downtown area, but there may be other areas or routes that either ETVs or SSVs are willing or able to operate within, that you could set up in consultation, I'm sure, with like traffic engineers and appropriate advisors who can, TLC staff who can, like, you know, suggest to you what areas are good for that or what are not. It may be that in light of the fact that the Downtown Connect focus study is on the immediate downtown area, some of the restrictions that apply to that zone may not apply to some of the other zones. So it might be possible to limit the number of permits that are allowed to operate in that immediate downtown area, but maybe allow people to have additional permits that they're allowed to operate in alternate zones.
Let me just follow up, because that was a very long answer, but I appreciate it, how thorough it was. So the bottom line is, right now, under the code and our rules, there is not a special permit that we could award that could only operate outside of the core. If we grant a permit, there's no limitation as of right now. Is that right?
Yes, but I think that you could use your regulations to expand upon Section 320, Section 030, and Section 060 to specify that there could be such limitations.
Okay. And then also, correct me, please, but we met earlier this year talking about the number of permits and had a meeting on the public need and necessity for ETs or ET permits, and we decided as a commission that the number would be much lower than it is presently, but we did not implement that number because we wanted to give as much notice as possible. Is
I
that
believe
correct?
you did adopt a range of 35 to
Yes.
70.
We did adopt a range, but we ended up renewing all existing permits at that time.
Yes, that's correct.
So we have decided that the number will be between 35 and 70 at this point.
And right now we have 90, 91? 90.
That's like 50 sightseeing and 40 ETVs.
So that's kind of the purpose of this working session, I guess, is to be kind of a brainstorming session to kind of test out what ideas you'll like or dislike and what you might want to ultimately put in the regulations to specify a process for how to get to the number that you want to see. If we can make that a little less restrictive by honoring the findings of the study and, keeping the downtown less congested, but at the same time allowing people to operate in other portions of Davidson County, I think that's an option, but that's entirely up to you all to decide.
Now, at the start of the meeting, I know I asked if you could identify for us what the current criteria is that we review in deciding whether to issue a permit. And I know you rattled off whether the applicant has violated our rules, whether the applicant has violated any codes or laws which reflect unfavorably upon the applicant, such as impermissible use of alcohol, excessive noise, failure to pay taxes, making a false statement. Are there any other criteria presently in our rules?
No.
Those are the only ones that are presently in the Metro Code.
So the idea around this whole conversation of allowing some of the number that's been reduced to actually be repurposed would be us establishing zones of operation. Zone A, Zone B, or Zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and saying there's going to be 27 ETVs allowed to operate in Zone A, which be the core, but 17 can operate in A, another 13 can operate in B.
That's an option before you. You don't have to do that, but that is certainly an available option to you.
And I say that to say, how hard would it be for the team that you have in place to enforce that? Because now at this point, you have a border that that they have a zone of operation and hours of operation. Now for that team, if we adopt or consider turning each section into zones, they now not only have to police hours of operation, but zones of operation. Do we have the ability to do that?
Yes, sir, we do.
Could you expand on how you're saying yes, but I'm more curious as to.
Well, currently, right now, our enforcement folks not only enforce the ETVs and sightseeing, but they also are enforcing the parking meters. They're also enforcing the sidewalk ordinance, and they're also enforcing the music. So we expand just outside of, the downtown core. We're actually out on the west side, we're on the east side, and we're on the south side. And as well as we also enforce the abandoned vehicles in the right-of-way throughout the whole county. So I have enforcement that goes throughout the whole county. So if we have identified zones, we simply can and will enforce it based on the regulations that y'all establish.
Thank you.
I would just ask that y'all let us work with the industry on establishing those zones. I found the conversation last week with the Sightseeing folks very, very insightful. They have some pretty strong ideas, and I think they're really do want to be good partners, understanding the challenges that we have, and with moving vehicles and people and the conflicts that are created in the downtown core. And I'd like to have that opportunity if we're going to think about expanding cores, also routes for the ETVs, that I have a chance to have the conversation with the ET drivers, ET companies as well, to understand what would work and what would not work. because I think that was really very helpful for me to hear last week, what worked for the sightseeing companies and what did not work. And I would say maybe perhaps in the past we weren't as tuned into that. And so last week was extremely helpful to get a really good picture of their business practice and where that could be a good blend that would fit within our traffic demands as well as their business demands.
So for today, I understand that we've got the difficult task of trying to come up with a process that gives rationale to our decisions later this year when we reduce the number of permits that are existing.
Correct.
And that's really challenging, because if the existing permit holders, not even considering new ones, but the existing permit holders, assuming for the moment that they meet the criteria that we have existing, they haven't violated any rules, they haven't violated any laws or codes reflecting unfavorably on them, then it's difficult for us to pick one or the other and say, well, you get a permit, but you don't get a permit.
I think Mr. Fields and Mr. Brooker have a draft of some thoughts, and part of it includes randomized selection, like a lottery.
I was about to ask, could we have, is a lottery?
Absolutely, you can have a lottery, and we would recommend it as a fair process. Once you've decided kind of like how you want to portion things out, like either for the most desired permits or for, all the permits, that is absolutely an option.
Because it doesn't even seem like a proportional decrease would work, given that the dispersion of, if that's a word, excuse me, the way the permits have been dispersed, we've got 5 companies that have more than one, and we have 6 companies that just have one each, I understand. So it would be difficult to decrease based on proportionality.
Yes, that's certainly true. Billy, do you want to talk about the?
Yeah, real quick, Mr. Chair, something that I think was really enlightening to me last week in meeting with the sightseeing vehicles is a lot of the folks that when the permits were being distributed last time, and some folks were asking for more than one but only received one, and then they went over and they said, okay, we'll do sightseeing. They actually haven't really been doing sightseeing. Their vehicles have been parked in a garage. So it's kind of led to some conversation of consideration in the recommendations to you. So I just want you to know a lot of those sightseeing vehicles that were actually given out aren't actually being used at all, simply because it just didn't work into their business plan. So I just wanted to share that out as well. So go ahead, Billy. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Put together a recommendation, a concept that you could look at that would utilize a lottery, it's well, a 2-part lottery. One would obviously be for existing, one would be for new companies. I'm going to work with the existing. I think Mr. Rooker would share the new. We would take all current ET certificate holders would file an application with the commission, and it'd be completed, and we would get all the detail that you need. Each certificate holder would be assigned up to 2 vehicles to start with. If they're a current holder, they would get 2.
As long as they have not had any violations
correct.
or, the criteria.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I just want to add that in
Sure.
there.
Yeah, assuming there's no issues, they could be awarded up to 2. If they only have 1, they would be, and there's no addition, and they would get the 1. Now, if they wanted more than the 1 they are currently assigned, there would be a different application process. You'd have to actually consider that for another award. But if each current certificate holder would be allowed to participate in a lottery for up to the current number of licenses that have been awarded by the TLC. For instance, if a TLC, if there was a certificate holder that had 6 certificates or 6 licenses for vehicles today. They would get their 2, but the 4 would then be added into a lottery. They would be able to draw to be able to get the other 4 that they're currently assigned. And again, if there were any additional vehicles that were requested, then they would have to apply for additional vehicles, and they would have to go through the process that you're already familiar with, that would say, yes, we believe there's additional need, and we would grant you your additional, up to the 2 again, or whatever they had requested. So I think Mr. Rooker will talk about the new company.
Before Mr. Rooker gets into that, can make sure I understand what we're talking about. Current holders of licenses, permits, are going to get either 1 or 2. And if they already have more than 2 licenses, those get thrown into a pot and they reapply as if a new applicant.
They would not have to reapply for the 4 they already have. That
All
would
right.
just go into the lottery as I won't say a right, but as a privilege, I guess is a good word, or at least as a fact.
Opportunity.
An opportunity.
Yeah.
That would, that they currently had 5, they had 6, they would be awarded the 2, then the other 4 would be into the pot, and they would be able to draw.
In competition with anybody else that goes into the pot, or in lottery with anybody else.
Correct.
All right, now, what's the number of ETVs when you go down to that mandatory minimum of 1 or 2? What's that number come to?
I'm not sure.
How many current?
companies?
How many?
Yeah,
would
how many companies
would
do we
be-
have?
Yeah, how many would be granted on the 1 and 2 minimum?
I think it's 16.
16?
Probably 15 or 16 companies only have 1 or 2 requests.
All right. Somebody say 14?
14.
So we're looking at somewhere 14, so 14 guaranteed under that proposal. Okay, thank you.
14 times 2.
The range would be between 14 to 28.
Right.
So if everybody had 2, they would get 2, and that would make it 28 at the max. If everybody had 1, then everybody'd get 1. That means the minimum would be 14. So somewhere in between there is the magic number. We can get that for you, sir.
I got one real quick question for consideration. Does this take into account any diversity issues for women, minorities, handicap owners? Is there any inclusion in that at all?
Not in this particular plan. This particular part that we've talked about, or the lottery concept, is application process, where you've got existing companies, then you would have new companies. And it would be just as a lottery. Those that would draw, could be successful.
Yeah, no, the current code doesn't speak to that either.
Okay, so the new process for new companies applying is just like it is now. But for the record, an application for an ET Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity must be filed with the TLC. The application must be complete, and all requested materials and information must be filed with us. If the application is complete, the applicant will be asked to attend a public hearing for consideration of all applications. If the TLC determines additional certificates are warranted, the TLC will determine how many vehicles should be assigned to the applicant. When the hearing is complete and assignments have been made, any approved licenses request will be entered into the lottery process. So it's just like you would do the other companies. Is the beginning of the process. If you do determine that additional certificates are needed, they would just go into the lottery process.
So just trying to get a handle on that. So if we're talking about currently about 90 permits, and we're looking at between 14 and 28 that would be assigned to existing operators, and the rest of those permits that are currently in place would go into a lottery for some limited number. I mean, presumably, because we've talked about 35 to 70, unless we change that, then there really wouldn't be any available for new folks.
Then
That is
right? I'm just
correct, yes.
Thinking
that
out
is
loud, just trying to
generally
understand,
correct.
yeah.
And unless you just found it that there was a need for them, you
Right,
wouldn't
right.
assign
Well,
any new companies.
I think the idea was that, given that there would be the 2 to the 1, 2 depending, and so anywhere between the 14 and 28. If someone new came along and applied and y'all felt like they met the criterias, then their request would go in the lottery like everybody else.
Okay, so when there's a lottery, there's a single lottery
Correct.
for the unassigned, not 2 separate lotteries for
Correct.
existing and new.
So the idea is both.
That's your proposal?
Yes, ma'am. So both the existing and the new folks would all go into one lottery.
Yeah, you could have 150 people in that lottery and pick out 20 or whatever. the
Yes, sir.
number- Whatever number is deemed to be appropriate.
Correct.
Because right now there'd be 62 to 76, starting off in the lottery.
Would you propose a separate lottery for sightseeing versus ETV?
Well, we have not gotten to that conclusion yet. And I will say, if there's that opportunity, we can bring that back for further discussion. But there might be an opportunity for that, especially if we do create these zones, and they're only going to apply within those zones. And as I said, it was a really great, insightful meeting. We have another one that we've already scheduled for January. I'll send that over to you, Mr. Carr. But just to kind of, today, I would say it would all be in one consistent, because that's how the regulations are written. And then if we're going to break it out into zones, I think that would give a different opportunity.
If I may, I'm not sure that's exactly right. I think that the regulations actually do differentiate between seated sightseeing and ETV, and allow separate findings of convenience and public convenience and necessity to be made for each category. However, that I think, and this is me characterizing, so y'all correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but I think that the data didn't support making that distinction, because the data showed that the seated sightseeing vehicles were just as slow as the ETVs.
The data from the downtown study?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I hate to back us up, sorry, but just in thinking about this, we sort of came to this range of conclusion of 35 to 70 after sort of discussion and study, but that was before the downtown study data were out as well. And if you consider public necessity and convenience outside of and our assumption has always been that most of this ET operation is in the downtown core. So if we are taking a look at the study, taking a look at the potential of spreading out ETs, if people are interested in doing that, we might need to relook at our range, because the data will have changed, presumably. Right?
Yes.
Just thinking out loud.
So I
Yeah.
think that the data that you were presented at the meeting at which you came up with the 35 to 70 has been updated, and that, like, when they further ran the numbers with some more accurate assumptions, that they came up with more clearly, a more clear break-off number.
Right,
I'm
we
looking
might-
to staff to,
Yeah,
like, characterize that correctly.
I mean, one might assume that we need even fewer than what we had said before because of additional data, or not, but I'm just trying to process through it. Thank you.
There was additional discussion on the statistical significance of vehicles within the network, and then additional data presented that stated that egressing, for example, from a garage, could back a garage up
Yep.
2 or 3 hours, which I've experienced. I couldn't pinpoint it to an ETV necessarily. Right, it could have been any number of things on a street that would keep me from getting out of a garage.
I just pulled up the chart real quick to answer your question, Commissioner. There are currently 19 ETV companies and 13 sightseeing companies. And some of the ET and sightseeing are the same, but we do have them separated out. If we were to follow the recommendation put before you, then 27 permits would be issued under ETV and 20 permits under sightseeing would be issued. So that's a total of 47 permits out of the 90 that would automatically go, and then the rest would actually fall into the lottery.
Under
undetermined number.
Yes, under the undetermined number, correct. But 47, based on the recommendation that staff has given, would be 47 that would be reissued. And again, that's assuming no issues. So, and then the difference, which is basically what, 53? If I'm doing, no, 43 would be what would go into the undetermined and into the lottery.
Quick question. In the lottery itself, would it be biased if the lottery had a separate condition versus the initial 1 to 2 automatic certificates based on facilities? Because I know when we were dealing with the scooters, what helped us to determine who stayed and who didn't was their ability to corral what they had, to apply technology, to update the bikes, because that made a difference in the service of the bikes and the problems that we were having with the bikes. Now, I know with the ETVs, part of the problems we're having is where they stop and pick up, where they store, where they come from. And in considering adding on to the 1 and 2 in the lottery, I would think that that might be a consideration in the lottery in itself, their ability to add on and not add back to the initial problem.
So I think you all can, at your discretion, kind of commit as little or as many of the up-for-grabs permits to the lottery as you want to. I mean, there's just the 4 criteria listed, but it's very clear that the MTLC may take into consideration the following non-exclusive factors among any other criteria they see fit to adopt in their regulations. So I think that you can, if you want to add to that list of 4 and consider some other criteria, even before you apply the lottery element, if you choose to apply a lottery element, that is something that you could work into regulations potentially. So it's kind of no pressure, but up to you.
I was just asking, would it be a legally confusing thing to do?
I think you'd have to have very clear criteria. Like, I think the regulations would have to be something that's pretty specific and able to be applied across the board in an even-handed way.
Explain to me why doing a lottery is better than just whacking everybody by 10% or 30 or 50, whatever you want to do.
It's not necessarily. It's one option. That's another option.
Because all that would take is a spreadsheet in a couple of hours, or maybe less.
I think the difficulty is there's some companies that only have 1.
You would have to hold them harmless.
And
And maybe even hold harmless the ones with 2. 2's not very many.
I mean, I think there doesn't need to be. I mean, the number of vehicles that you make a finding is the public necessity and convenience justifies. Right now, that's 35 to 70. But like Commissioner Westlake was saying, that number could come down based on more current information if that is what you all decide. Then you can decide how to get down to that number using any methodology that's fair and even-handed. The only thing is, like, it might not be fair and even-handed to not allow any new company to have a shot at any permits whatsoever, as opposed to, so the way that, like Billy and Rookie's suggestion had, like, perhaps allowed for there to be some additional permits up for grabs that even new companies could vie for. I mean, I think that depends. Like if you come down from this 35 to 70 to 35 and giving each of the existing companies 2 permits is already in the 40s, then you may not have any extra wiggle room to give away in any lottery or, permit cut.
Why would we give anybody new ones unless they're substantially different from the current ones? I mean, bus is a bus. I'm sorry to be so simplistic about it.
We
mean-
certainly could listen to hear if they have a presentation that differentiates. If somebody stood up and said, I've got this bus that rolls at the speed of traffic and isn't going to be loud and is going to be in a different neighborhood that has 6 lanes of traffic so cars can go around them and it won't cause a traffic delay, I'm certainly willing to listen to that if they apply. I would be curious just relative to the traffic and the route discussion that you're having with the sightseeing folks. You know, if one of the conditions, and you could argue for Nashvilleians, a big thing is traffic, right? Your Connect Downtown study has been so focused on traffic.
And safety.
And safety. NDOT staff could establish routes without this commission's approval today. You could help traffic right now without coming to us by just saying you have to be out of the downtown core after 2 o'clock Monday through Friday. And I'm not saying that that's the right time, but that would be an instant thing that could happen tomorrow. And before our before our April meeting, if NDOT has established a no-fly zone or times that are a no-fly zone, as I think about how I might look at the numbers, hearing from staff that staff has put in place zones to help the traffic flow would certainly be something that would influence a number, because it would be easy to look at, I think, that information, and I'd kind of maybe further that, say, hey, maybe there is a no-fly zone in the downtown core at certain times, but past that, when you're outside the core, you're not on I think a lot about the major collector street plan, so you're not on a constrained street, you're not on a 2-lane street, you're not on a street that has traffic flow over X number of cars per day, so that you could try to make traffic flow better, which is what I know a lot of Nashvilleians and tourists really want. And so I guess if we're talking about today things that would influence or help us make that consideration, that's certainly one for me. And I don't know if you've got that, if you're thinking about in that meeting with those operators, establishing those zones to help the traffic flow.
Yes, that was the kickoff of the conversation, and letting them being part of the solution versus me just coming up with the solution, our staff coming up with the solution. And I will tell you, I found the folks that were there were very helpful, and they are very interested in, again, being part of the solution. So I was very happy with the way the conversation went, and I felt like it was very honest conversation between all. My biggest concern in the downtown area is pedestrian traffic. That is our number one mode in the downtown core. Majority of the folks are moving by feet. And so by reducing the traffic, and which is a part of the problem as well, and the conflicts, that is a big help. But it is very important, and I just want to share, because this is something that I heard, it is important to a lot of these companies to be in the downtown core. That's their business plan, and that's it. So for us to go in and do a no-fly zone at certain times really would just kill their business, and we might as well not give out any permits at all. So I think the
But we already have it.
We have no.
Right, we have it.
We do. We actually forbid from 4 to 6.
From
And it
4 to
was
6.
correct. And I
Yeah.
had many of the businesses tell me that alone right there has been a financial issue for them by a significant amount of money, not a little bit, but a pretty significant amount of money. But my thought was, if we could start with the sightseeing, and they wanted to have sightseeing, and I didn't feel it was going to create a traffic impact, and we would look at their recommendation of their routes, and we could get them out of the downtown core, that would help with the reduction of the number without not necessarily cutting everybody off. So I was thinking of sharing the love. And they were open to that. But also, if we could identify a zone that we could add more permits, that would allow their business to grow, because again, sightseeing is something really important. It actually provides a great value of what all is in our city. We have some really cool things, and it's not all in downtown. And so being able to kind of highlight those things, I think, would be really great if a sightseeing company is interested in doing that and staying outside of the core where we're having the conflicts with the pedestrian and the traffic flow. And then those permits would be in that zone and different than what we're doing today. And so we just started that conversation last week, and we had a little bit of homework that we have to do and they have to do, and then we're regrouping back in January. But my goal is to have something to offer the commission for consideration as we move forward to the April date.
And thank you. I certainly hear the message both from the operators and from you, the strain it would put on a small business, somebody who has one pedal carriage, right? Or 5 pedal carriages, or one ETV, that regulations, particularly around operating hours, harm the business model. And the same challenge is that one ETV or one pedal carriage or whatever it might be that's slow moving has an opportunity to have a really negative impact on
Yes, sir.
other people.
And it has. And so part of the conversation was because in the room that day wasn't just the sightseer, because remember, we have a lot of ETV folks that also have sightseeing permits. So they were in that room. And I made it very clear that they need to follow the regulations, that the loud noise, not having their folks under control, not abiding by the rules that have been established, has just really put a very negative impact on our community. And some of where we are today in this conversation is because not everybody is following the rules. And so, again, if they would kind of police themselves among each other in the business industry, it would make everybody's life a lot easier. But they are very aware of who the bad performers are and who is following the rules. And they are going to have to, either they're all going to go down together or they're going to all start performing a lot better out in the field so that we're not having these conflicts. The loud noise is a problem. The people screaming out or hanging out of the vehicles. The pedal taverns, they're just as loud, if not now louder than the ATVs is sometimes. And, they are... I'm having other issues with the pedal taverns actually leaving the pedal tavern in the middle of the tour, which is totally not allowed. And we are gathering pictures and information because that's information we want to bring and share with y'all when y'all are actually making the decision on the pedal taverns. And they are outside of the ETVs and sightseeing. So we are trying to pull all of that information together so that this board has it for consideration as y'all move forward.
Could you just, and I don't know, you probably don't know this off the top of your head, but in advance of the next meeting, if you don't know it off the top of your head, follow up with either me or the commission around either any of the traffic studies that went into Connect Downtown or the Connect Downtown study itself relative to peak times for rush hour.
I actually have that.
Is it 4 to 6 or is it a little earlier? Or?
It's actually 3 to 4. It's actually has moved. So we have again, they looked at peak times for weekends and also for weekdays. So, but the major peak time, the heaviest traffic has adjusted to 3 to 4, as well as the number of recommended permits. So if you remember when we originally did this and presented it to you, the number was 35 at the peak time. That number is now at 28. So when we brought back and had KCI here and gave y'all the update to the study, that actually decreased down to 28, where now they're saying that at peak time, which in the weekday and the weekend is roughly around 3 to 4, or actually now 3 to 6, I should say, excuse me, that number is actually 28. So,
but 3 to 6 for rush hour.
That is where rush hour is hitting, with the majority of the traffic at 3 to 4.
With north of 30,000 children
Yes.
not in public school and another 30,000 kids choosing their public school, it makes sense that parents are leaving and with
yes.
flexibility, early to get their kids.
Yes, sir.
To me at least, makes sense. And then does I guess the recommendations for 35 or 28 or the relative to traffic flow doesn't necessarily take into account the improvements that could be made under Connect Downtown. So I'm trying to think out 3,
Yes,
5,
sir.
7 years from now.
Correct.
That if third is one lane northbound, or if second is one lane each direction.
Right.
That could further complicate traffic to have.
Or improve it.
To,
Yeah, I think.
I'm thinking a slow-moving vehicle on a one-lane road, northbound, like Third,
Right, but.
wouldn't necessarily improve the traffic flow on Third.
No, but it would improve the number of lanes that you have provided. So right now, if you're on a two-way road, you're taking that other lane and you're creating it as a traffic all moving in the same directions. It's not necessarily going to make it worse. It could actually improve it. And so the studies from Connect Downtown have reflected that the traffic flow would improve with the idea of two-way and second and one-way pairing third and fourth. There's still a lot of conversation that needs to be had with the community on that process and moving forward. We do know coming out of Connect Downtown, there's two major focuses that we will be doing, and that will be the traffic signals, because we do feel we can make the best impact for the whole community under that. And then the second thing will actually be better regulation or management of the curb, because that is also a big problem. We have people that stop and park and do not move their vehicle. Therefore, a truck comes in, parks in the lane, and then traffic is backed up and all of that. So there are some coming out of the box with Connect Downtown. That will be our two main focuses. And there's more conversation analysis study that has to be done about other. But as far as two-way and second, and then one-way pairing third and fourth, that could improve traffic, but it could also make it bad. And you're absolutely correct. That's why we said this number would be an annual review. We would have to come back every year. This is not just something we're going to do once and go. We're going to be reviewing this on an annual basis, coming back with recommendations. So if we are able to improve the traffic flow, get things going, I mean, because also if you remember, there was this really great plan for transit, because transit is also a big issue. It takes them too long to get out of the downtown core, which is messing up their ability to provide that convenient and reliable regional transit operation to the community as a whole. Creating that sort of around the outer core, a transit-only lane that would only be for transit, that would allow transit to move and not be stuck there for 35 to 40 minutes when it should be basically a 7-minute run. So that's another thing that could be a really big consideration as well. So those are the three top priorities in Connect Downtown that we're focused on once we get the draft based on all the conversations we've been having with stakeholders in the community. But those will be our top priority coming out of it. But we'll be back before you, because if we're able to implement that and it makes a big change, we may be able to come back and say, okay, we have a recommendation to up the number of permits. So we'll be reviewing that on an annual basis with y'all.
So,
You're welcome.
Mr. Fields, if we adopt the idea of having a lottery for awarding of permits, do we need to also discuss a process for determining the number of permits? Because right now, we've got this kind of vague, public need and necessity standard.
I think your rules have about 10 things that said you're going to take in consideration. The amendment has added some. So, clearly, as I think Ms. Castona said, you would want to make very clear decisions on why you made whatever decisions you made. As far as criteria, obviously that would help you to make the decisions. Did you have?
I may have understood the question differently. It does specifically say that if you make a determination that the existing number of ETVs, including SSVs, is so great to be exceeding the public need and unnecessarily adding to traffic congestion, then your next step is that you have to come up with a number. The MTLC shall determine what lower number would meet the public need. So you're fixing a number. That's one of the steps in the process. And that could be, just for sake of argument, 28, say, for example.
Tell me what the criteria is for coming up with that absolute number.
So that, as far as I know, I don't think there's, so the code has some general language, but it's not much broader than just kind of the public convenience and necessity in itself. It says,
What I would think by the language that you guys proposed,
change that.
the absolute number is already
Yeah, no, that's the
predetermined by the 1 and 2 designation. The only alternative would be within the lottery itself. Is that
Okay,
not
here it is.
so?
In 030B, it says, in making the above findings, the MTLC shall, at a minimum, take into consideration the number of entertainment transportation vehicles already in operation and whether existing service is adequate to meet the public need, or so great that it's exceeding the public need. That's it.
Okay, so right now, we've already determined that the number exceeds. We did that earlier this year when we said the new number is going to be between 35 and 70.
Which is less than 90, so that's
Right.
correct.
What I'm trying to figure out is if we need more specific criteria, if we decide the number should be 50, to be able to back up why is it 50 as opposed to 53 or 48 or 60. That's what I'm struggling with.
I think it depends on the evidence before you. So it's the staff who will present to you any relevant factors that they think you need to know in order to make that determination. In this particular case, it was the Downtown Connect study, Connect Downtown, I always say it backwards, that kind of gave you some jumping off points or natural breaking points in the data that I think you based the 35 to 70 on. It'll just depend on the evidence before you. Can you set more specific criteria if you want to? Sure, that is within your rulemaking authority.
And I hate to muddy the water even more, but as you think about sort of public necessity and convenience, it might be useful to have some discussion about what that means. Because I think that over the last couple of years, we've really heard that there's this necessity because the demand for the service is high. But there's also a public necessity for safety, and there's a public necessity for traffic to flow. And so one thing that we might consider doing is kind of laying out all of those things and say, when this commission is going to look at public necessity and convenience, these are the elements that we will look at. And to the extent there are data around any of those elements, that seems helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
And which takes priority.
Always safety.
Exactly,
Yeah.
my point. And that the demand for the services could be high at the sacrifice of safety. But safety being the priority, the demand is less of a consideration.
Oh, wait, is that from the rules? Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, Eric is going to read through from the rules.
So in making the finding for the award of a certificate for public convenience and necessity, the commission shall, at a minimum, take into consideration, 1, the number of ETVs already in operation, 2, adequacy of existing service to meet the public need, 3, the applicant's experience in the operation of an entertainment company and its vehicles, 4, the applicant's history of violations and/or citations of alcohol laws, noise violations, Hub Nashville complaints, and other non-compliant behavior. 5, the ability of the applicant to comply with the laws and regulations, including the equipment and service proposed to be furnished. 6, the applicant's financial responsibility and condition. 7, safety of the public in the operational area. 8, the probable effect of increased service on local traffic conditions. 9, traffic flow. And 10, compliance with existing noise ordinances. And that comes from Section 801 of the Transportation Licensing Commission Rules and Regulations. So those are the 10 criteria that the commission must, at a minimum, take into consideration, but you can add more if necessary.
So as I hear that, I mean, I really hear that kind of being a mashup of a couple of different things. I mean, one is, one set of things is how we get to a number for public need and convenience. And that's traffic and that's safety and that's some of the things that you read. And then the other feel more like criteria. If, for example, you were going to use a lottery, the other look like criteria that you could say, maybe you're not eligible for the lottery because you've had too many violations or you've abused the alcohol laws or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, but I see those as, I mean, one is kind of getting to how many are we going to do for public necessity and convenience, and then the other is really more about who is qualified to be in the running, for lack of a better term. So, yeah. I mean, that, for me, I need to think about it that way, too.
And, you know, and from a logistics standpoint, I think one of the things that we could consider is you do have two kinds of vehicles. You have entertainment transportation vehicles and you have seated sightseeing transportation. With those two, with separate functions and separate definitions, you could very well say we're going to do a lottery that's going to deal with ETs and we're going to do a lottery that deals with seated sightseeing. Now, again, we'd need to do some, I'm sure, some vetting and some legal reviews, but certainly you have a wide latitude in the way you make your decisions. So certainly we could take into consideration. And again, that would also change the process. It would change numbers. It would change, especially with zones and other operational issues that could be changed and modified.
It would just be that treating them differently would have to be supported by evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick question to throw out there. I've heard two options, the surgical knife, so to speak, and the lottery. Are there any other options that anyone on the board wants to put into consideration?
If I may, I think that's part of the reason we wanted to gather you together today, for you to begin the conversation and the mental, among yourselves as a group and the public, but also be thinking as an individual commissioner, because this will not be the last meeting we're going to suggest that you need to have a working session on, I don't think, between now and April. So this is an opportunity to say, okay, here are some things that we're looking at. I'm confident that tomorrow we will also find more things that can be looked at. We're going to, so, you know, from a staff standpoint and NDOT, we're not just done. We've got, there's lots of resources that we'll bring to bear to help give you the best information that we can give you for you to be able to make an informed and a good decision for this community.
Are there any other cities that have adopted this lottery type system? San Francisco, Texas, Florida?
It's interesting that you'd bring that up. We've begun a conversation, and we don't talk a lot about, but the International Association of Transportation Regulators, which are members of. The president and I have had a conversation this week, and I'm hoping we're going to have another one, more of a broader conversation. The president is the former commissioner of taxi cabs in New York. He clearly has great experience around the world, and there are other cities that he's actually working on right now for us to bring back additional information to continue vetting with you on what happens in other places. So yes, there are other cities that have some level of lottery, and potentially other ideas that come as well. But we're certainly working with Mr. Dawes and his team in New York.
Was that the protocol 20 years ago to obtain a taxi cab medallion? Was it a lottery, or how did? I know that that's not a problem anymore. Or maybe I'm mistaken on that. But the news says that other forms of transportation have reduced the, but I'm just curious, 20 or 30, 30 years ago when I think medallions may have been hard to obtain, was it through a lottery or how did you get one?
I'm not sure I can answer that accurately. There were 30,000 taxi cabs with medallions driving in New York a few years ago, and they're clearly fewer than that, and worth up to $1 million. So there were, I will inquire when I speak with Mr. Dawes to make sure I understand that, but I don't want to give you a bad information. But he did assure me that there are other jurisdictions, again, around the world, because it is an international group. We that share information with each other on a regular basis.
Well, I like the idea of a lottery because there does seem to be some inherent fairness on when it comes to actually awarding the permit. But I still think that we need to talk further about the process for determining the number. Because that's the part that I think I struggle with the most, and then we as a commission would probably have the hardest time. If we go off of the Connect Downtown study, the number should be 28. If we listen to the current permit holders and entertainment transportation companies, the number would be much higher. If we consider public comment, it'll be anecdotal. The number could be all over the place. And the best we could do earlier this year was 35 to 70. I mean, that's a huge range. But ultimately, we're going to have to decide a number before we implement a lottery. Otherwise, we're just going to get challenged after we decide and that our decision was arbitrary as to the number of permits. Maybe not the process of awarding that number of permits, but the actual number.
And I think that number of 35 to 70 was based off the study at that time, with 35 being kind of a first threshold and 70 being another threshold. Sort of by default, I think we defaulted to that range. One of the other things for me, I agree, first we have to decide how we're going to, we have to decide how many before we get into allocating them, whether by lottery or surgical knife or whatever. But typically we have that process where it is a difficult decision, where we have a public hearing, we take all the information, and then this commission has to make a decision. To me, at this point right now, I'm still at a loss about how many, because there's a lot of discussions going on. And if there's routes where people are going to be away from the downtown corridor, I might be inclined, I think it might favor a closer to the 70 number. If it's, if nobody can agree on any routes anywhere else, then I think we're closer to a lower number. I was looking at this to begin with. As I understand, you were telling me there are 13 sightseeing companies, 19 ETV companies, that's 32. Looking at a division of 1 to 2, that comes to 47 permits that would be given immediately or would be reissued. That cuts our number almost in half right there. And that's not without any consideration of putting some people out in Centennial Park or other areas, maybe the airport, I don't know. But so I think our process is what we've always done, and that is we're going to have a public hearing, and we're going to have to do the best we can as a commission, taking some of the anecdotal evidence, taking some of the experiences of people on the commission, taking the data from the Connect Downtown, and using our best wisdom. One of the things I'd like to know, and maybe the companies can help me, is how many are actually out on the streets at any given time? There shouldn't be any from 4 to 6. I'd like to know, given the 90 permits, how many are really in the downtown corridor at any given hour during prime time?
Second to motion.
It'll be under that number.
Well, we certainly can query the companies and ask them for an hour, at least their report on where they are and what they're doing from them.
Yeah, one, I don't want anecdotal evidence. I've seen
No.
6, I've seen 4.
Yeah.
I'd really like to know reliable evidence of how many are actually out on the streets. And I know it varies from
We
the
can ask
weekends
for
to the, but you know, how many are really out there?
We could ask for some self-reporting,
Yeah.
we could start with that for sure.
But that's my thought about the process. I think we're gonna have to just bite the bullet and have a public hearing and do the best we can with the data that's presented to us. And then fix that number. And, you know, we may still have a range to where we have a range, and then we have the 47, and then we might add some more, might not add some more through the lottery. Though I guess that's gonna be kind of difficult to manage.
I mean, per your request, Mr. Field, are not most of these vehicles GPS, and that wouldn't be some type of guess? I know the scooters were, so are they not GPS as well? I mean, I seem to remember most of the owners coming up saying that we GPS we know exactly where they are. So that should be a very specific number, being that they're GPSed. I know I can tell you where all my trucks are now on my phone.
Yes, they are GPS. The difference with scooters, we actually can monitor that directly because the GPS data is available to us directly through an app. We do not have that particular tool as the office to be able to do. However, the companies are required to have GPS, and one of the things we can ask them to report, again, that's where I was going with the self-reporting, is ask them to report a period of time, and we can look at that, and we can share it with you directly. We will know. And if we find, we can make that request.
And I will say at this time of year, typically there's a lot less on the roadway than there is in the spring and the summer. So we start seeing a drop in the number of ET vehicles that are on the roadway, as well as Pattern Taverns at this time. But I would want to ask and look at it for the whole year, Billy, versus just a snapshot of time.
Yep.
Because right now is not a good representation of the challenges we're having out on the roadway network.
Yeah, it's amazing how easy it is to drive into town today, and
Well,
during the holidays when everybody's out of school, and
exactly.
a lot
I
of
was
people are
thinking this-
taking work
I was
off.
thinking the same thing too, sir.
And the tourist level goes down during this time, so. But it would be interesting to know how many are actually out there over the course of the whole year. And I think we would have to depend a lot on the companies to come in with credible numbers.
And one of the things we've talked about, again, it's been at a discussion level, is that we may end up making a recommendation that we require them to have the same kind of GPS that we have on the scooters, where we actually can monitor it ourselves and look at it when we need to look at it. We've not done that, but again, it's certainly a tool that potentially is available since they're already required to be GPS.
If you were looking, you'd asked a question a few minutes ago about other ideas on how to make this selection, and I am curious just relative to eligibility. I assume that you would have an eligibility report, or you would have a report on the Hub Nashville complaints, if there are any, the citations. Is there an update on that? Have there been citations or Hub Nashville complaints on any of the operators?
Yes, and we're actually working on the reporting system now our reporting process for that. We have, again, you have two different things. We have those that have been cited, those that have gone to court, and of course the results. And then the Hub Nashvilles that we get, that we've had contact with. So yes, there are those reports out there, and our intention beginning in the first of the year is to give you enforcement reports at each meeting to keep you advised on that, and not just that, but whatever enforcement we have throughout our various vehicles. Citations are being issued for taxi cabs that are not compliant, for vehicles that aren't properly licensed as OPVH, for wreckers or whatever else we might issue citations for, or have hub complaints on, that sort of thing.
you know, I've thought about a matrix, you know, weighted matrix. So you could have a 6 or 8 or 10-point matrix. I mean, just if we're talking about different ideas or pathways,
Yeah.
certainly a lottery, you could have a scaled and weighted matrix that you could give priority to certain things as an example.
Right. Or you might have to meet a threshold to get into the lottery.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, just the fact that we have 19 and 13 companies doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right number either, and you hate to punish really good operators on a completely, you know, value-free system if there's a matrix that you could use to.
To help evaluate.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, relative to number 6, the applicant's financial responsibility and condition, what do they report to you?
They do not, other than when they make their initial applications. It comes in different forms. Some of them have been various financial reports from accountants and that sort of thing. That's been a challenging thing over the years because one accountant will do it this way and another accountant will do it that way. That's also something the commission can give specific direction on, that we can require for that application. They'll be coming in February. So if there's specific financial information, we'd have to create a rule to go with it, but I don't think it'd be that difficult. I say you'd have to create a rule. I suspect there's also language in the ordinance that allows the director and staff to make a request for any additional information. So if this commission says we'd like to know X, Y, Z, then that would become a part of that application. Mm-hmm. And so far, we have not received any new applications for this year, because it's really early, but we certainly can do that. So if you have...
I think back about 15 years ago, 12 years ago, when I was a member of the Board of Education, and we looked at charter school applicants, and one of the things that we looked at was financial responsibility, and it was a big debate on the Board of Education. Do you allow the startup who's never had experience, maybe a great educator or someone who's really solid, do you want to give that person who doesn't have any operating history or any money, or very limited operating history and money, a shot? And ultimately, the board didn't really go down that path of allowing or granting charters to the people who didn't have really robust financial wherewithal. So I'm just curious what's reported and what we could see. Because the strong financial player certainly could survive another downturn of COVID or something, and they would be maybe the strong partners or strong licensees. Maybe partners, strong word, but strong licensees.
What does everybody think about who do we want to hear from during a public hearing on determining the number of permits to issue? In the past, we heard from the police department that was monitoring downtown, and they were very credible and gave us good information about Joyride at the time, the various different vehicles. I'm curious, who do folks want to hear from? Obviously, we want to hear from NDOT and
NDOT.
the study.
We go to see if there have been problems with bus routes and buses getting blocked.
We do want to hear from the operators, the companies.
For sure.
I think also the police, maybe the
fire
downtown
department.
police department, maybe the fire department, EMTs.
I watched a fire truck blocked by traffic on 3rd for 4 minutes a few weeks ago. And 3rd is 2 lanes, and I can't tell what it was, but it just wasn't flowing. And I know that's given the fire department some consternation when they can't get into the core.
So maybe we could hear from the fire department whether it is ETVs or not. They may say, no, we don't have a problem with them.
Yeah, I mean, there was there were cars and ETVs at the time stuck on 3rd. Don't know why they were stuck.
Well, Billy, do our officers not keep some type of data on when they find ETVs blocking traffic, the amount of time, the number of times?
You talking about our inspectors?
Yes.
Our inspector's authority or a responsibility authority, whatever you like to describe it, is limited to non-moving violations, blocking traffic, we certainly would, it's something that could be observed, but it would not be something we would be writing citations over. We would be writing citation over blocking the public right-of-way for sidewalks and loading zones and that sort of thing.
Our
But they-
parking and loading and unloading
Correct.
zone.
But
We
they
have
don't
a couple
record
folks.
that.
I'm sorry?
But they don't record it as a number of incidents.
If we get complaints that come in, excuse me for interrupting,
no.
but if we get complaints that come in from the community, pictures and stuff like that, we do record that because it's considered part of a complaint that would actually come in through the hub and stuff. So we do record, we have documentation of that. But as far as a citation, unless they are physically there and they see it, they'll write the citation. If they do not write a citation, it's not considered a violation.
Other than the hub, there is no.
We have written citations.
No, I mean, as far as incident-wise, not necessarily a citation. He's trying to get out of the garage, and a pedal tavern is down at the light, and the reason why he can't get out of the garage is that pedal tavern is stuck at the light. That one of our inspectors is there and notices that, you know, this pedal tavern is stuck at this light for 10 minutes, and it's back traffic all the way up 3rd Avenue. We don't record or you don't have a way.
If they witness it, yes, they will record it. They'll put it on notice. We really hope that the community will actually report that through the hub. And that is where we have gotten a lot of those types of violations recorded, is somebody will put in hub is that they're stuck in traffic because the pedal tavern can't get up the hill because everybody's too drunk and falling off. We do get a lot of those types of reports, and we actually document it. We also get that for the ETVs as well. And for sightseeing, I actually got a complaint the other day about a sightseeing vehicle operating between 4 and 6. So I do get those types of complaints that come in and out. But, you know, we don't have a person that's on every street catching every single thing. It's something they have to witness at that time.
And we do have more staff than we've ever had. There's absolutely no question. You know, in my early years, we had 2 inspectors. Now I think we have 13 positions. Now we have a couple of vacancies they're trying to fill.
We have a
14
total of
positions.
25 positions.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And currently, 8 of them are operated by LAS, and then we have 4 vacancies. So, and we are looking to bring, it's looking like we're going to bring all of that in-house, and we're going to run all of it through us. So we are looking, we did some major interviewing last week. We have some folks that will be starting training actually at the beginning of the new year. So on January 2nd, they'll be joining us, and we'll probably be beefing up the staff even more from there.
Are there other things from a commission standpoint that you'd like to have staff and/or legal to gather to be prepared for another conversation?
Is a lottery legal? For this purpose?
I mean, I don't think it probably runs afoul of the state law that prohibits a lottery in the form of illegal gambling. But I mean, that's, you know, we could also call it a random selection. So.
And nothing precludes any of the commissioners conversing directly back to staff or legal with specific information. You should not, obviously, you're good at this, you don't talk among yourselves between meetings, but if there's something you want to kick back, we certainly could look into it. We also don't communicate what you share with us to another commissioner. In other words, it's our relationship with you that we're going to be dealing with to
Although it would
prepare.
be a public record.
It will be a public record.
What about emails that commissioners receive from interested parties? Should we be forwarding them to you to distribute to disseminate to all the commissioners?
I'm assuming like that email from Ms. Gleason
Yeah.
probably went to everybody.
Yeah, and I didn't know if it did or didn't because it just says to Patrick McNally, so, and then it was titled to Mr. Vice Chair, so when that came in, I was curious as to whether everybody else received it, and then if we receive something, should we forward it to you, Mr. Fields, so that you can then make sure everybody's received that input?
Typically, if we're going to have a public hearing, what we've done historically is if someone comments to us or to you, we then copy that piece of information. We make it a part of your meeting record. So if you were to come in and look at the packet of information you receive, in addition to that, we're also making copies of any letter or communication that we receive that we're aware of. Now, in terms of should they be forwarding it to staff, I'm going to have to defer back to legal on the public record issue on that.
So regardless of whose hands the record is in, if it meets the definition of a public record, it's requestable. So if a member of the public sends an email to a member of the TLC about TLC business, I think that probably is going to meet the definition of a public record. And if we later get a request to which that record would be responsive, we would need the individual commissioner to provide that email in response to the record's request.
So it seems like I should send it to Mr. Fields so someone maintains it, you know, rather than counting on me to maintain an email.
I would make a recommendation that if that's the case, then what we would do is you'd send it to richard.rooker2 at nashville.gov. And Mr. Rooker, as you know, has a long and extensive history of record keeping.
Yes, sir. I do.
And I would ask anyone who's interested that's in the public, if you're going to be sending an email to anybody, please address them to the staff of the TLC instead of individual commission, at least for this commissioner doesn't want to receive it. I'd rather it went to the staff at TLC, and then they will make sure it's distributed to the rest of the commission.
TLC, Public Works at nashville.gov goes to every member of the staff.
Well, you know, as a jumping off point for making some forward progress here, I do like the idea of a random selection. The kind of the baseline, though, that is being proposed by staff kind of presupposes that number of permits there's a floor there if we're going to award 2 permits automatically to existing permit holders that meet the criteria that have more than 1 presently, and then 1 permit to the existing holders that meet the criteria that just have 1. But I still like the idea. So what I would suggest is we get a little more meat to the bone and actually see the proposed new rules. Presumably, we need to implement that prior to the April meeting, correct? And then to Mr. McNally's point, if our more difficult task is deciding the number, and we just need to go ahead and continue to have our annual meeting where we make that determination based on objective criteria from studies and hearing anecdotal evidence from the public and hearing from the police and our inspectors and the companies out there. We can continue to do that as well. When do you think staff could have the proposed random selection rules to the commission?
I think in general, I think in general what we figured out is that we were going to start with bones, and that we would come to you with a general idea. And then would come back to you next month, because we're right at the end of December. I mean, we can shoot for next week if you like, but we could very likely next month come back with a version that we could distribute and say, we had a framework. We've now had more information from you, and then we can add some steps that are very clear. We have, one of the things that we didn't mention, but we said, one of the things you've got to do is the TLC has to determine the total number of vehicle licenses to be awarded before you ever start anything.
Right.
So, clearly that's a step you have to make. Hey, you get to that step, and that may be outside of the lottery, but it still may be a step that we need to make sure that we're following the most recent amendment to 677, as well as the existing rules that you've already passed, as well as any additional rules, because as Ms. Haber has shared with you, there are 10 things that are there, but there may be more. There may be specific finance things that you want to see or want to know prior to making a decision. So certainly we can do that and go for that next month.
Well, we won't make that decision on the number until April.
Correct. Correct. Well, you'd make it when you have a hearing, whenever that might be.
But you're not suggesting then that we couldn't implement new rules on who gets permits until after we make the decision on the number, correct? We could still come up with the process on how we're going to award
Yes.
permits prior to
Yeah.
deciding.
Oh,
number.
absolutely, yeah. What we want to do is make sure all of your processes are in place, that you've thought about it, you've worked through it, it's been, reviewed, and it's publicly available to go forward.
I think we could have this ready for distribution to the commission at least a week prior to your January meeting. That way you would actually see the recommendation. We'll also look at a weighted metrics that was mentioned by Mr. Hayes and a consideration of just going in and slashing. So we can put that framework all together and present that to y'all for consideration at your January meeting. And get that distributed at least a week prior to.
This is always helpful for me, and, the rules get circulated numerous times throughout the year and over the years, but if legal could circulate to the commissioners the existing applicable rules, especially the ones we referenced today, so we can just read them in full.
And we've already got a general lottery process already kind of written up for you. So when all those things are determined, we can share that with you also.
Can I backtrack a second? The proposal was that the companies that have one permit would automatically get one reissued, and the companies with two, and I think the max was 5, would get 2. How was that decided that somebody that already has 2 gets 2, or somebody that has 3 gets 2?
What we were saying is that all companies would get up to a total of 2. If you're a company with just one permit issued today, then you would get 1. Now, you could apply for more, but that'd be a separate process. So it would, again, it was just an issue of anybody with that has more than 1 would get 2. And then at that point, they'd have to come back. The commission would have to make an affirmative decision on should they be allowed to apply for more. But again, they would get, if they've got more than 2, anything above 2 is going to go into the lottery itself.
I understand, but if I'm the company that has 2, I'm pretty happy. I'm going to get 2. If I'm the company that has 5, I'm wondering that this may be an arbitrary decision that I only get 2 now. And I'm thinking about our decisions being challenged down the road. There's no across-the-board fair play, so to speak. 5 goes down to 2, 2 keeps 2, 3 goes to 2, 4 goes to 2. There's disproportionality of the reduction of the number. And we're at 47 under this proposal to start with, which is pretty high based on the number that I think some folks are thinking about on this commission. So I'm just wondering, if we're going to do it that way, why isn't 2 maybe just 1, 3 maybe 1, 4 and 5 get 2? And we reduce the number down to something maybe I don't know what it would be,
And
30-something.
We can certainly do that. 2 was the number, in talking with a lot of the different companies, two was the number that I heard several times from the companies, that 2 permits were very manageable and reasonable. A lot of the folks that have 1 and 1 sightseeing would rather have 2 ETVs, that kind of scenario. So that's why if they stay with 1 and they currently have 1 ETV and 1 sightseeing, if they get in the lottery, and if they get the other ETV, they'll most likely drop their sightseeing. So that's where the 2 came from. It was actually a number that the companies had shared out. But going back to your suggestion, we certainly could. We could say everybody's going to get 1 and that's it. That'll drop the number, or as you said.
Or maybe 2 or 3 gets 1, or maybe 2 gets 1, just to
and-
reduce this 47. Plus the other, I mean, because we're kind of arbitrarily saying 5 only gets 2, you know?
Right.
But I can see how, and the other thing that I'm curious, but this goes back to my other question, if somebody has 5, but they only have 2 ever out on the street, that kind of impacts why 2 seems to be a threshold number. Or if somebody has 3 and they never have more than 2 on the street at a time, again, that makes sense to me as to why they're happy with just 2.
And that today I cannot speak to
Right.
if that's the case or not. But hold on, I want to bring up for you real quick, because I can bring back up and share with you, because I do have the chart here. Just let me, there we go.
I was looking to try to get this 47 down a little lower somehow.
Well, that's why our staff is thinking maybe we disperse, we do 1 for ETVs and 1 for sightseeing. Currently, right now, we've actually gone through and reissued all new not certificates, but stickers that go on the vehicles. And we actually have we have a company that hasn't even claimed their sightseeing. So we feel like some sightseeing permits are going to drop off anyway. So that's why it might want to look at doing the lottery in 2 different categories, 1 for sightseeing and 1 for ETVs. But let me just pull this up for you real quick, because most folks, I can give you the number real quick. Here we go. Thank you. And looking at this list, currently, there's only 1, 2. We have pretty much, there's 2 companies that have above 2. Most of them, and one is, and then there's one that has as many as 12, and then there's another one that has as many as 3. Everybody else is either 1 or 2. Okay. So there's no 4 or 5 out there. And on the sightseeing side, everybody, most companies have 1, but we have 1, 2, 3 companies, 5 companies that have above 2. And most of them are 1 or 2. And then you have 1 company that has 9, another company that has 5, 1 that has 18, and then 2 that have 4.
So it's really not going to impact that many companies?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. I'm going to keep this up, just in case any more questions. I don't have to make y'all wait.
And it does seem likely that we're going to be looking at 2 lotteries, 1 for sightseeing and 1 for ETVs, especially if we start looking at sightseeing routes out of downtown corridor. Yeah.
The only thing I would caution you on that is if we're going to do that, we also need to have some, like, an evidence-based basis for making that distinction.
And I would say, my recommendation would be if the sightseeing agree to work on the perimeter and versus in the core, that would be the evidence base that I think, because that's going to take them out of the pathway of the largest impact of traffic.
Is it not true that, and I'm just speaking from experience here, that a lot of the companies asked for that 2nd or that 3rd permit for maintenance vehicles? And can we not have a maintenance permit to where, just say they have 2 vehicles on the road and they want that 3rd permit because they have to cycle one of the 2 of those out on a constant basis, and they don't want to have a vehicle on the road that's not permitted? Is there, I mean, can we get a maintenance permit?
You know, I have to highly recommend that we do not do that. We have had problems with folks that are running their sightseeing claiming that they're sightseeing vehicles being used for maintenance and using it for entertainment, yet they got both of them out operating. And we've had a lot of issues with that in the past. So if it's an ETV, it operates as an ETV. If it's a sightseeing, it operates as a sightseeing. And they, from a safety aspect, need to keep their vehicle up and operating from a safety perspective. But and that was one of the reasons why we actually updated the actual sticker and permit that went on them, is we had duplications that happened. I had folks that actually duplicated the sticker and added more vehicles to the route. So we actually went and got different stickers that couldn't be copied. And so we had everything that was happening over the course when we started kicking this off. It's gotten much better. I have to say folks are better players than they were in the beginning, but I would just highly please ask that you not ask that of us, because that is allowing more vehicles to be on the road than there needs to be.
Well, again, I mean, that we have more enforcement officers than we've ever had, and and that you caught that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did.
And it was remedied,
Yes.
and so it's not happening. And I mean, you're always going to have bad players.
But we're enforcing lots of different things. We're not just enforcing one thing. And so, again, they should be maintaining their vehicles at all times for the highest amount of safety as possible. The need for a maintenance, in my eyes, just isn't really necessary if they're properly maintaining their vehicles.
Well, I think we may have exhausted what we can accomplish today. I know we allotted ourselves 2 hours to kind of try to begin tackling these issues. They are important. And just to recap, it sounds like we are going to get some written material at least about a week prior to our January 18th meeting. It's at the date of our regularly scheduled meeting. And I look forward to getting all that. Do we need to do anything to adjourn?
Certainly, if you'd like, Mr. Stone's asked if you wanted to schedule another work session. If you wanted to schedule another work session, we certainly talk about it today. By the same token, if you wanted to discuss it at the next commission meeting on the 18th, which will be a month, more or less a month from this week, we could do it then. It's entirely,
I think it makes sense to schedule that session at the January 18th regular meeting. We'll have had a chance to digest what the materials and may know, plus we may have a better idea of our schedule.
Mr. Fields, will you have met with the Transportation Illuminati by then?
I certainly, I'm going to let Matt know you said that. He's going to really like that. I would suspect that we will. And he, in that last communication I had with him, he said, he reminded me that he is still an expert witness on the books for issues that are related. So if we need an expert witness, he says he's very happy to come to Nashville because he does like to come here. But yes, we anticipate having information. I talked with him this morning, and he said they're pulling it together. So the holiday may cause us a little bit of a slowness, but he's working on it.
Well, tell him we look forward to him coming here in April as an expert witness.
He is, he certainly is well-versed in transportation issues related to for-hire services.
And we'll let him know you put him up for grabs.
Expert witnesses often expect to be paid.
I understood he was volunteering for what
We'll
he
pay him
just
in
said.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming to the meeting. We'll adjourn.
One thing real quick,
Yeah.
I just relative to who we're hearing from, I mean, if there are, we said operators, NDOT, police, fire, if there are other, pardon me? WeGo, if there are other hospitality operators.
Yeah, we generally hear from
I would be interested to hear from hospitality operators. And I know the CVC.
I am having a separate meeting with those folks now through Connect Downtown and having a very also big conversation with them about how we can meet their needs. They are another very big part of the industry. They're down here significantly with big, large buses as well. It's just theirs are more for transportation than for entertainment. So we are having that conversation as well. So I will be able to give you an update on that. We've had 2 meetings with them. We have another one set up in January. And we've gotten some really good feedback on what their needs are. So I can actually have more to share in January with y'all.
And that's CVC,
That's the CVC, yes, sir.
Downtown Partnership.
Yes, sir.
Be curious to hear from them.
Okay.
Be curious to hear if they want to share anything with us.
Yes.
I know they have in the past.
I write that down.
Thank you. Sorry to interject.
All right, thank you, everyone.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.